welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we have a story that is going to completely change how you view modern sports.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today is simple, but undeniably ambitious. We are unpacking the life, the legend, and the sheer cultural force of a man who practically single-handedly dragged professional football out of the shadows and into the national spotlight.
We are, of course, talking about Harold Edward Red Grange.
We're drawing from an incredibly comprehensive Wikipedia article on his life today, and I mean, it is packed with details that honestly read like a Hollywood script.
They really do. And to fully appreciate this, you have to understand the landscape of the 1920s.
Right.
Back then, college football was king. It was viewed as pure, it was prestigious, and it packed tens of thousands of people into grand stadiums. Professional football, on the other hand, was considered a gritty, slightly scandalous side hustle.
Played on dirt fields by guys just trying to make a few extra bucks on a Sunday.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how one 22-year-old athlete completely inverted that power dynamic and created the blueprint for the modern superstar athlete. He took a fringe sport and forced America to pay attention.
And I want you to look at this not just as a sports story, but as a masterclass in personal branding, sheer physical dominance, and the chaotic early days of sports marketing. Long before athletes had $100 million endorsement deals or social media empires, Red Grange was writing the playbook.
He really was the pioneer.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning, chronologically, because his origins really explain the physical powerhouse he became. Grange was born in 1903 in a Pennsylvania lumber camp.
Which is a remarkably tough start.
Yeah, it really is. His mother passes away when he's only 5 years old.
Yep.
And the family eventually moves to Wheaton, Illinois, where his dad becomes the chief of police.
And it's in Wheaton where we see the first flashes of this generational athletic ability. In high school, he wasn't just good at football, he earned 16 varsity letters. 16. Across 4 sports: football, baseball, basketball, and track. During his high school football career, he scored an astonishing 75 touchdowns.
That is just unreal.
But it wasn't without its risks. There's this terrifying detail in the source material about a game against Scott High School in Toledo. Grange took a hit that knocked him completely unconscious.
And we're not talking about being dazed for a few minutes, right?
Now, he was unconscious for 2 straight days, and when he finally woke up, he actually had difficulty speaking.
That is just terrifying. Especially considering the total lack of medical protocols back then. A 2-day coma from a high school football game would end almost anyone's athletic ambitions today.
You'd think so, yeah.
But he recovers, and he continues to build this legendary physique in a very blue-collar way. To help his family out, he gets a part-time job lugging blocks of ice for $37.50 a week.
Which wasn't just a job, it was basically the ultimate core strength training.
Exactly. It earned him his first real nickname, the Wheaton Iceman. And you combine that raw ice lugging power with speed that is almost hard to comprehend. He was running the 100-yard dash in 9.8 seconds in the early 1920s, running on cinder tracks with heavy leather cleats. That was just a fraction of a second off the world record.
That combination of raw power and Olympic-level speed was just unheard of on a football field. So he graduates high school and enrolls at the University of Illinois, initially planning to just stick to basketball and track.
But then Bob Zuppke steps in.
Right. The legendary football coach Bob Zuppke gets a hold of him, and the trajectory of his life shifts. Grange models clothes at a local store, he boxes as an amateur, and he absolutely dominates on the gridiron.
And the moment that elevated him from a great player to an American myth happened in October 1924, right? In a game against the heavily favored Michigan Wolverines.
Yes. Michigan was the undisputed powerhouse. They had won a national title the previous year. This game was the grand opening of the new Memorial Stadium at Illinois, packed to the brim.
Set the scene for us. What does he actually do?
So Grange receives the opening kickoff and returns it 95 yards for a touchdown.
Incredible.
But he isn't done. Over the next 12 minutes, just 12 minutes of game time, he scores 3 more touchdowns on runs of 67, 56, and 44 yards.
Wait, 4 touchdowns in 12 minutes?
4 touchdowns, hundreds of yards before some fans had even found their seats.
I cannot even fathom the energy in that stadium. 12 minutes to completely dismantle a national champion defense. How did the sports world even react to something like that?
The cultural reaction was immediate. To give you a sense of the dynamic, after the game, Michigan's coach, Fielding Yost, tried to downplay it. He grumbled, "All Grange can do is run."
Oh, sour grapes.
Very much so. And Grange's coach, Bob Zuppke, fired back with a legendary retort. He compared Grange to one of the most famous opera singers of the era, saying, "And all Gally Kersey can do is sing."
That is brilliant. It's a perfect way of saying, yeah, he only does one thing, but he does it better than anyone else on the planet.
Exactly. And the sports writers leaned right into that mythology. You have to remember, this is the golden age of sports journalism, where writers used incredibly flowery, poetic language. Grantland Rice, who was basically the definitive voice of sports at the time, wrote a poem describing Grange as a gray ghost thrown into the game that rival hands may never touch.
And that poem is what led Chicago sports writer Warren Brown to officially dub him the Galloping Ghost.
Precisely. And Damon Runyon, another legendary columnist, wrote a recap where he said Grange was basically 3 or 4 men and a horse rolled into one. He compared him to a blend of Jack Dempsey, Babe Ruth, Al Jolson, and Man o' War.
When you are being compared to the greatest boxer, the greatest baseball player, the greatest entertainer, and the greatest racehorse of a generation all at once, you have transcended sports. You are a true cultural phenomenon.
Without a doubt.
So he's undeniably the most famous man in sports. But he's an amateur college kid playing in an era long before athletic scholarships or endorsement deals.
Yeah.
How does he actually turn that fame into a paycheck in the 1920s?
That is where a man named C.C. Pyle enters the picture. Pyle was a movie theater owner in Champaign, Illinois. He was a showman, and he saw incredible financial potential.
The ultimate promoter.
Exactly. Pyle approaches Grange with a pitch that would alter the course of sports history. He asks him, "How would you like to make $100,000, maybe even $1 million?"
In the 20s.
Yeah.
That is a staggering amount of wealth.
Life-changing money. They agreed to a 60-40 split, with Pyle taking the 40% but paying all expenses out of his end. Pyle then goes to the owners of the Chicago Bears, George Halas and Edward Sterneman, and negotiates a deal where Grange and Pyle get 50% of the gate receipts for every single game Grange plays in.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because going pro wasn't just a career choice back then. It was a deeply controversial cultural taboo.
Oh, heavily taboo.
The amateur ideal was considered sacred. College coaches like Amos Alonzo Stagg and Michigan's Fielding Yost absolutely despised the move. They thought professional football was a dirty, commercialized corruption of this pure college game. It caused a huge rift, didn't it?
A profound rift. There is this vivid, almost cinematic anecdote about Grange's final college game against Ohio State that perfectly captures this tension. It's known as the Zuppke taxi incident.
Oh, I love this story.
So Grange has played his final college game, and he and Coach Zuppke are sharing a taxi back to their hotel in Chicago. Zuppke knows Grange is about to sign this pro contract, and he is desperate to stop him.
Right.
He keeps ordering the taxi driver to take the long way, driving all over the dark city streets just to buy more time to talk Grange out of it. He's pleading with him to preserve his amateur purity.
And Grange is a practical, blue-collar guy who used to lug ice. He shoots back at his coach, asking a very simple, logical question. If you get paid for coaching football, why shouldn't I get paid for playing it?
It's such a modern perspective in an era that completely rejected it.
Yeah. Zuki was so insulted, he basically stopped talking to him, and they had a very public falling out at the team banquet.
The backlash in the press was intense, too. Herbert Reed wrote an article in The Outlook where he actually used Grange's name as a verb. He talked about degranging a game.
Meaning what, exactly?
It meant to exploit a game for financial gain. Grange was challenging the entire moral framework of amateur athletics. He was making the case that his talent had immense financial value, and he had every right to capitalize on it, purity be damned.
So let's look at the actual pro debut, because the turnaround is a whirlwind. It's Thanksgiving Day, 1925. Grange debuts for the Chicago Bears against the Chicago Cardinals.
And 40,000 people show up.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
But our sources mention he only had 3 days to learn the Bears' T formation because he played a single-wing offense in college. What exactly does that mean for him as a player?
It's a drastic shift in football philosophy. In college, Grange played in the single wing. That system was all about brute force and direct action. The ball is often snapped directly to the star runner, and a phalanx of blockers just tries to plow a path forward.
So straightforward. Get the ball and run.
Right. The Bears, however, ran the T formation. This required a quarterback standing under center, taking the snap and executing sleight of hand handoffs, misdirection, and complex backfield timing.
That's a lot of mental gymnastics.
Huge mental gymnastics. Grange had to learn an entirely new vocabulary of footwork and offensive timing in 72 hours before facing grown men who hit harder than anyone who'd ever played against.
Learning an entirely new offensive scheme in 3 days is absurd. But that game was just the beginning. From what I'm reading, the schedule they set up for him borders on inhumane.
It was essentially a grueling barnstorming tour designed to squeeze every possible dime out of Grange's popularity before the hype faded. Pyle and the Bears booked a traveling circus. In December of 1925 alone, they played 8 games in just 12 days.
8 games in 12 days.
They were traveling by train, playing on frozen dirt fields, with virtually no time for physical recovery.
Modern NFL players need a full week of ice baths and physical therapy to recover from one game. How is his body not just completely disintegrating?
Well, it was disintegrating. He had a massive target on his back. Every defensive player wanted to be the guy who tackled the famous galloping ghost. The physical reality was brutal.
Yeah, I read about the Providence game.
There's a poignant moment during that game against the Providence Steamroller where Grange's arm was so swollen and he was in so much pain that he simply let a punt sail over his head because he couldn't physically bear to catch it and take a hit.
And the crowd booed him.
They actually booed him. That was a harsh lesson. He realized that the professional audience is paying for a product, and if you don't deliver, they turn on you instantly.
That has to be devastating. But the tour was succeeding financially, right? I see a note here about a critical game in New York.
Financially, it was a triumph. The most vital stop on that tour was playing the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds. Somewhere between 65 and 73,000 fans packed the stadium.
Wow.
That single game and the massive influx of cash from the ticket sales literally saved the Giants franchise from going into crippling debt. Red Grange's sheer star power financially stabilized what would become a foundational NFL team.
Incredible. And didn't they even go into Washington, D.C.?
They did. The team went to the White House to meet President Calvin Coolidge.
How did the president react to meeting this cultural icon?
It's a fantastic historical moment. Coolidge is introduced to the team, shakes Grange's hand, and says, "Glad to meet you. I always did like animal acts."
You are kidding.
No! The President of the United States genuinely thought he was meeting a group of people who performed with actual bears. It highlights just how far off the radar professional football was to the general public before Grange came along.
That is hilarious. But back to the physical toll. You mentioned his arm was swollen in Providence. Did he keep playing through the pain?
He did, and it gets much worse in Pittsburgh. Before the game, a former All-American named Bo McMillan comes into the locker room, sees the condition Grange's arm is in, and begs him not to play. He tells him he's risking his future.
Let me guess. He plays anyway.
He goes out there anyway. And predictably, it ends in disaster. He suffers a torn ligament and a broken blood vessel, which leads to an artery hemorrhaging. Just horrific physical trauma for a 22-year-old.
And yet, the tour continued into January. They headed south and west. With all that grueling travel and injury, was it just misery, or did they actually get to enjoy the celebrity lifestyle?
Oh, there were definitely flashes of the roaring 20s lifestyle amidst all that pain. My favorite anecdote from the January tour happens in Tampa, Florida.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's the night before a game against the Tampa Cardinals. Grange gets pulled over by local police for doing 65 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. But look at who is in the car with him. He's driving around with 2 professional golfers and an Olympic swimmer.
It's like a traveling rat pack of early sports stars.
Exactly. And to get out of the ticket, he just hands the cop $25, and they let him go.
A $25 bribe to get out of a speeding ticket with an Olympic swimmer in the passenger seat. That is the most 1920s story imaginable, and he could certainly afford the $25. When the tour finally wrapped up, what was the financial takeaway for Grange?
When C.C. Pyle handed Grange his final check for that rookie season, Grange had made approximately $125,000. To put that in perspective, a highly skilled professional football player at that time was making less than $100 a game.
So he didn't just break the wage scale, he shattered it. He invented the concept of athlete leverage.
Which naturally leads us to ask, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what happens when a star gets too big for the league?
Right, because Grange and Pyle realized they were the main attraction. The NFL needed them more than they needed the NFL.
Precisely. So Pyle tries to buy an ownership stake in the Chicago Bears. George Halas and the other owners firmly deny him. So Pyle and Grange do what any incredibly wealthy, ambitious duo in the 20s would do. They start their own league.
Wait, they just decided to start a rival football league from scratch? How does that even work logistically?
It takes an incredible amount of audacity. They create the American Football League, the AFL. To give it legitimacy, they put themselves on a marquee team called the New York Yankees, and they managed to lease Yankee Stadium to play in.
So they're going head-to-head with the NFL.
Exactly. They had to recruit players, establish rival teams in other cities, and set up a completely parallel infrastructure. It was a direct threat to the establishment. But the entire league's financial viability rested entirely on the shoulders and the drawing power of Red Grange.
Did it work?
The AFL only lasted 1 year before folding, but it forced the NFL's hand. The NFL ended up absorbing the Yankees franchise, bringing Grange back under their umbrella.
So he's back in the NFL playing for the Yankees.
Hmm.
But disaster was waiting for him, wasn't it?
Yes. October 1927. The Yankees are playing the Bears in Chicago. Grange takes a hit from a Bears player named George Trafton. It's a messy play. Grange's cleat catches in the turf, Trafton falls on him awkwardly, and Grange suffers a devastating knee injury.
Oh, man.
It was a torn tendon, and the rudimentary medical treatments of the day just couldn't fix it properly. The galloping ghost, the man whose entire identity was built on world-class track star speed, had his speed permanently taken away.
It's a tragic moment for any athlete, but the way Grange handled it is incredibly revealing. I was struck by this beautiful, heartbreaking quote from the source material. He said, "After it happened, I was just another halfback."
The humility in that statement is striking.
He didn't deny it. He didn't make excuses. He just accepted his new physical reality. So if he couldn't outrun everyone anymore, how did he stay in the league?
This is the reinvention phase that makes him a true football legend, not just a physical freak of nature. He sits out the entire 1928 season to try and heal. He comes back to the Bears in 1929. And instead of trying to be the offensive lightning bolt he once was, he reinvents himself.
Into what?
He becomes a gritty, highly intelligent defensive back and a situational player. Playing defense in that era meant reading the offense, understanding blocking schemes, and putting your body on the line in open space. He learned how to outthink the game on a deeper level. And his two crowning moments late in his career reflect that fundamental shift.
Right. They weren't 95-yard kickoff returns. In the 1932 championship game, he caught the game-winning touchdown on a gritty, short-yardage play.
And even better, in the 1933 championship game, he made a game-saving, touchdown-saving tackle to secure the title for the Bears.
The guy who used to outrun everyone won a championship by diagnosing a play and bringing someone else down. It's a full-circle moment for his career.
It really shows his dedication to the sport itself beyond just his own personal glory. But while he was reinventing himself on the field, his off-field life was just as varied and interesting. Pyle didn't just see Grange as a football player, he saw him as a Hollywood star.
How does a football player from Illinois transition into silent films?
Pyle leverages Grange's fame to get him a starring role in a movie called 1 Minute to Play. And the production story highlights Pyle's sheer ruthlessness as a promoter.
Ready to go.
They're shooting this in California during the blazing summer heat. But the climax of the movie is supposed to be a college football game in the Midwest during the crisp autumn. The studio couldn't afford to pay enough extras to sit in the sun wearing heavy wool coats.
So how on earth did they pull off a stadium crowd in the middle of a California summer?
Pyle runs a scam. He promotes the filming of the movie's climax as a real, genuine exhibition football game featuring Red Grange. He tells the public that anyone who shows up wearing autumn clothing gets in for free.
Oh, that is devious.
Thousands of eager fans show up in heavy sweaters and wool coats, sweating profusely in the California sun, acting as unpaid extras for the film, all because they thought they were getting a free ticket to see the galloping ghost.
That is brilliant and ruthless marketing. Did he do more acting after that, or was it a one-off?
He took it quite seriously. He went on a vaudeville tour called Sem on Red. He later starred in a 12-part action serial called The Galloping Ghost. And he wasn't just standing there looking pretty. He insisted on doing his own strenuous stunts, vehicular chases, complex fight scenes. He was essentially an early action star.
And looking at his post-football life, his resume is almost comically diverse. What did he do once the cleats were permanently hung up?
He didn't just rest on his laurels. He became an insurance broker in Chicago. He was a pioneer in sports broadcasting, announcing Bears games for CBS and college games for NBC in the 1950s, bringing his deep understanding of the game to the viewers.
Wow, a broadcaster too.
At one point in 1944, he was even named the president of the United States Football League, a league that folded before playing a single game, but it shows his executive ambitions. He was president of the National Girls Baseball League. He was a Republican member of the University of Illinois Board of Trustees. He kept himself incredibly busy.
He even came back to the center of the football world one more time when he tossed the coin at Super Bowl XII in 1978. It was the perfect acknowledgement of the bridge he built between the leather helmet days of dirt fields and the modern corporate behemoth the NFL had become.
It really was.
So what does this all mean? I want you listening right now to really imagine the sheer willpower it took for a 22-year-old kid from a lumber camp to look at the establishment and say, no, my talent has value and I'm going to get paid for it. He was the very first athlete to commodify his own talent on a punishing national scale. He took the physical beating so that decades later, players would negotiate their own worth. He paved the way for the entire sports media complex we consume today.
This raises an important question for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. Because Grange's midseason jump from college to the NFL was so controversial, the NFL instituted something called the Red Grange Rule in 1926.
What did that do?
This rule formally forbade players from joining the professional league until their college class had officially graduated. It was a rule designed to protect the colleges, and it was tested for decades by players like Joe Savoldi in the 30s and Kenneth Davis in the 80s.
That is fascinating.
It brings up a big debate. If an athlete possesses a fleeting, once-in-a-generation talent and their body is on the line every single play, who actually has the right to dictate when and how they are allowed to cash in on it?
That is the perfect question to leave things on. The debate he started a century ago is still echoing in sports today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Red Grange. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.